All right, so there's a mix of people in the room, contractors, consultants, clients maybe. There might be some clients here. And we all, I assume, will have some idea of what ECI is and what it's been when we've worked on it. But I think it's important that we sort of set the framework first around what is ECI, what isn't ECI, and how did it come about? What's the background to ECI as a model? Click. That didn't work. Click. That worked. All right. So when I was just putting the finishing touches on my slides yesterday, I thought I would have a look for some images that sort of captured ECI. So I being Gen X, I didn't go straight to AI. I Googled it first. The first image, or one of the images that came up initially, was this one. And the architect in me was tempted to go with this, particularly in light of that. I then asked AI to come up with something, and AI came up with that, which no one has ever seen, ever. So I was pretty comfortable that wasn't what I was going to go with. After trying to dig myself out of this rabbit hole, I came across this image, which I'm going to go with. This actually, I've borrowed this from the Canadian Institute of Architects. And I won't digress too much on this, Pam, but I did want to just make a comment on what this image might suggest to us about the way the industry is perceived by outsiders, because you'll note as a project manager and client rep, I certainly found it surprising that it's okay for a woman to have her hand on the shoulder of a man in a meeting. I also noted how dysfunctional that meeting is because everybody's talking all at once. And then I noticed that at least two of those people have had their hard hats photoshopped on. So maybe there's a whole separate session for us to have on how we perceive ourselves and how those who are outside of the industry perceive us. So, early contractor involvement has its roots in the shift to more collaborative arrangements, delivery models, which came out of, some of you will be familiar with the Latham Report from the 90s in the UK. There were, in response to that, over a period of time, there were a number of more relationship-based delivery models that were developed. And ECI was actually one of those, along with alliancing and partnering. So it was always envisaged that it would be a relationship-based. It would have a focus on collaboration, on an integrated team and working together. So Construction Excellence, the UK organisation in 2004, defined it as a procurement method that brings the contractor into the project team during the design stage, enabling the contractor to contribute to the development of the project in terms of buildability, cost planning and programming before the construction contract is entered into. Pretty good definition. One thing I did want to highlight about this definition is that it doesn't specify when in the design phase we bring the contractor in, right? It's silent on that. It's simply about design phase. So we'll come back to that a bit later. So the development of the model was really, I'm not actually hitting the right buttons. So the development of the model was around capitalising on this, which you'll all have seen a version of this at some point. McLeamy curve. McLeamy was an architect who claimed it, but it was actually devised quite a lot earlier than that. And it's around, essentially what it's saying is that early in the project you have the greatest opportunity to influence the outcome. And as you move through the timeline of the project, your ability to influence the outcome reduces and the cost of implementing any changes to improve the outcome increase. So what this model was suggesting is that rather than waiting until you have awarded a contract to find out that actually there's several much better ways of doing something, bring your construction phase experts in early when you've got a much better opportunity remaining to make changes and improve value of the output. Right, so that's the premise. We'll move on to a couple more definitions of ECI. The top one there, which I haven't provided a citation for, I apologise for that. If we circulate these, I'll fix that. ECI is a strategic approach that seeks to improve project efficiencies, enhance design quality, and exploit innovation opportunities. Another definition, this one was from a research paper, a literature review. ECI is a partnering approach in which the contractor is appointed at an early stage of project development to assist in planning, assessing buildability, and cost estimating. So the common elements here are early phase contractor engagement, non-binding or staged commitments. So someone mentioned earlier pre-construction services agreement. So normally the contractor would be engaged on a pre-construction services agreement, but there would be an off-ramp. Clients like off-ramps. So there would be clauses all through that around how there was no guarantee that the contract would be awarded ultimately. Another key element is collaborative input from the contractor, or a collaboration aspect, a partnering aspect to ECI. And of course all of that is in an effort to capitalise on better risk management, better cost time certainty, and potentially innovation. So that's ECI in its purest sense. So if you went back to 2004 and spoke to someone at Construction Excellence in London, that's how they would describe ECI, right? I think it's important or useful to also think about what ECI is not. So ECI is not the same as integrated project delivery, and I compare these two mainly because it's helpful to gain a better understanding of the features of ECI. So firstly, early contractor involvement. You're involving the contractor earlier on versus integrated project delivery where all your major stakeholders, your consultant team, your client, your contractor, all on board from the outset. ECI, 2 stages, generally, not necessarily. Whereas, so you've got your pre-construction phase and then your construction contract, so 2 phases. Whereas integrated project delivery, it's a multi-party contract. Single contract covers everyone. ECI typically moves from a pre-construction phase into a construction phase, which is a regular standard form contract. So most of the ECIs I've been involved with in my career have moved into the construction phase on the basis of a 3910 contract. Whereas integrated project delivery, it's usually a bespoke agreement that integrates all of the parties. An ECI involves limited risk sharing. So when you move into that construction phase, it really is back into the dynamic that we all know and love. Whereas in integrated project delivery, there is a degree of risk and reward sharing. So there'll be gain share, pay share, and pain share involved, which is all about aligning the goals of all of the parties to the agreement, right? It's a way of artificially aligning their goals. So in New Zealand, it's really interesting how ECI is described specifically in a New Zealand context. If you refer to the government procurement guidelines, it's described as an approach to contracting that can complement either a traditional or novated design and build delivery model, which is quite a narrow definition, right? Can be used to gain early advice from a contractor into the buildability and optimisation of designs. I'm a bit of a language geek, and I find that phrase used to gain early advice is maybe not in the spirit of a collaborative arrangement. So the wording here is quite telling. Then it goes on to say that ECI affords an integrated team time to gain an early understanding of requirements, enabling robust risk management, innovation, and public value. So obviously we're talking about primarily public sector projects when in the government procurement guidelines. But I think this is a good sort of sense of how ECI is understood and executed in New Zealand. It's generally a pre-construction phase, which is often quite tightly controlled, then moving into a more traditional construction contract. So that's actually a contrast to the way ECI is conceived, especially in the UK, where it is very much, there's a very strong focus on collaboration and properly integrating the team, which is something I'm sure we're going to come back to today. So the guidelines go on that the ECI usually takes the form of a two-stage approach to tendering. We've covered that. And this is actually taken straight from the guidelines. First stage tender includes fixed P&G and margin. And if you do have a look at the guidelines, you'll see that there's a very long list of documentation that should be included in the RFP that goes out to the market. The second stage tender involves the contractor working with the design team to provide input to the design and develop its tender price, right? I find that wording really interesting, that part of the contractor's input is described as the second stage of the tender, which is not how I would envisage a pure ECI should be. I think that started to go away from a collaborative partnering arrangement to a means of achieving a certain output or outcome for the client as you move towards signing up a construction contract. And it also says to me that we're still afraid in this country, particularly in the public sector, of tender processes that rely on qualitative assessments. So we're still afraid of awarding a contract based on anything other than the lowest price. Right? So what you're doing when you put together this package of information that goes out in the RFP in line with the procurement guidelines, you're actually trying to shift risk already, right? So this is, John actually emailed this image to me after we had an initial meeting a few weeks back. This is again taken from the procurement guidelines. Someone mentioned when might ECI be appropriate. That was a question early on, I think. You can see from here, this is taken from the overall guidelines document, that ECI is really, the benefit from ECI is most likely to be realised on a project that is more complex, perhaps more risky, maybe got some real program pressure. It's not something that you would use on a simple, you know, a warehouse or something. It's best used when there is real value in bringing in that constructor advice early on. So that's why we've got ECI here in the upper left-hand quadrant there on the project scale, complexity and risk axis. What's really interesting about this is the horizontal axis, transactional collaborative relationship. And we've got ECI pretty much on the line between transactional and collaborative. So it is really presented here as sort of more of a transactional approach, right? Which I would really strongly suggest we need to rethink that. Also, if you go right down to the bottom, the horizontal text in the blue, ECI is right there in the middle between low and medium opportunity for collaboration and innovation. Doesn't really make sense, does it?
I think that's meant to be a subset of panelist suppliers.
No, I read that as meaning it just overlaps with panel of suppliers. I think it's in the wrong place, but yeah, interesting to see where it goes. Again, certainly contrast that with the UK, where it's very much considered to be a process that enables collaboration. So, why might a client specifically not want to do ECI, even if the project itself, the characteristics of the project, lend itself nicely to an ECI approach? One is that it does introduce additional costs pre-construction, and I've seen clients attempt to do it at no additional cost, and that's a recipe for failure. It can be quite difficult to align ECI processes with organisational or sector process barriers, so particular approval requirements, funding approvals tend to be premised on a, sorry, thanks Pam, tend to be premised on a more traditional series of gateways. There is a real perception that ECI involves a loss of competitive tension, which I'm sure Brad and Johnny and Mike will speak to. A lot of clients, let's face it, have had negative past experiences with ECI, which comes back to the fact that we've generally not done it well. We also are suffering under the load of embedded industry dynamics. So we're pretty comfortable here in our industry in New Zealand around, you know, who's who. What, you know, we operate on some stereotypes, I think, and there's a need, if we're going to make ECI work, there's a need to get past that. I think that's it. I'll hand back the mic to you, Pam.
Thanks, Donna. Awesome. So, what we're going to have a look at, thank you. So ECI is not without its challenges, we see. So let's have a quick chat about advantages and disadvantages of ECI. Folks, who's chomping at the bit? Well, someone's got the mic. Oh, yes, you're chomping. Right, go.
Yeah, sweet. So I'll kick off with some far out that is pretty sensitive, actually. A few advantages. I think one of the biggest ones from kind of a cost certainty point of view is early access to the supply chain. Personally, as a PQS, when I'm estimating in pre-contract, ringing up suppliers, subcontractors, often it's just not seen quite as real as when you've got a contractor involved. There's just a bit more of a reality to it, and we seem to get a lot more out of it. That to me is a real big one. That early access to the supply chain, especially in ECI more complicated sort of projects where you're going to have some facades and things that aren't off the shelf from Bunnings. These are things that are coming from overseas. Often we get pricing from these overseas places. By the time it comes through the supply chain, it's 30% more than what we've been quoted. It's those sort of things that can trip us up early on, and as a result can enable us to essentially reduce some of our early contingencies. There's more cost certainty on some high cost items, and I'll just stop there for that one.
Am I going now?
Yeah, we're looking to you for your view on this. I'm interested in your view as a contractor, because my experience is that the reality in an ECI phase is it can still be really difficult to get access to the supply chain.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that, because I've covered a little bit of that in my presentation, but I still think we don't have enough trust in our industry, and I believe that the supply chain is part of the answer, but we still don't actually allow the supply chain to come in early enough. We might call them up and ask for some free advice, but they should actually be part of the solution in that early contractor involvement. We go down a route to reimburse a little bit, maybe, the contractor, but we stop there, and then we ask the contractor to go and competitively tender the supply chain. So I actually believe that we need to be a bit more bolder, have more trust, and bring the smarts in from the supply chain.
You've got your own one.
So I'm a client-side PM, and I've got three examples of projects that we ran under an ECI model. One started in 2013, one in 2024, and one in 2025. And if I get the time and anyone's interested, I could maybe talk through what went well on those projects and what didn't. I personally feel like if an ECI project goes really well, the PM can take about 20% of the credit. If it goes badly, you can take anything up. Well, I was going to say if it goes poorly, you could take anything up to 100% of the blame, because usually when they go badly, it's because they're not set up well at the start, and normally the PM and the QS and maybe the architect are around at the start and have the opportunity to influence it. And if you don't start well, then you don't end well. And I'll probably I don't know whether now's time to talk about them, but I might even name names and name the contractor and the project, and maybe even some of the people, because at least one of them's in the room. So that always gets people sparked up. Is anyone here from that worked with Arrow International back in the day? Okay, for them or with them? For them. Okay, so I won't speak ill of the dead, but the 2013 project was with Arrow, and so that was Plant and Food Research, which is in Auckland here. It was a refurb of a science building. Last year we got involved with New Zealand Strong on the refurb of a hangar at the airport. So Jimmy Corrick's in the audience, and we've got a cutting plan there, and we'll tell you in about a year or so whether it was a good plan. Yeah. And then one that I'm working on with Icon and Generous at the moment, which is probably the most sophisticated and best example of a cunning plan, I think. And again, it's going to take about 3 years to tell you if that went well, but that's really finely tuned, and it's an ECI DMB. But I think the overarching thing is it's horses for courses. Every one of those projects is different, and the client was looking for something different. So with Plant and Food Research in 2013, when we got there, Arrow was already there, running the good old Arrow kind of let's get started while we're working out what this is all about model. And so at that time, the client was wanting the ability to stage the project. And if you think back to 2013, I mean, that was the start of a prolonged period of escalation in the market. So it was about just getting a good contractor foot nailed to the floor. And so that was, I think they were their overarching drivers. With Air New Zealand and Hangar 3, they're looking, the overarching theme is they want a price with no variations. And so you know what that means. We think we know what that means. And then with this generous project in Parnell, it's a 13-storey retirement building, high-end, high-spec. They're looking for risk reduction and cost certainty. Very sophisticated client, sophisticated contractor, great design team, but it's the first DMB they've done. So time will tell if it's good. So as PM, we're quite often there, hopefully giving the advice to the client. And the question is, well, why are you doing this? And our advice 100% of the time is, if you think you're doing this to save money, you probably won't, but you'll never know. But I think it's just human nature. Everyone in the room knows that that when you're under the pump in a competitive tender, you really do put your best foot forward and work out, how you price what's in front of you, because that's what everyone else is doing, and you probably get the lowest price at tender. We will, and then you end up where you end up. And under an ECI model, you start with a different number and the sales pitches, but you end up in a better place than you would have if you'd gone traditional lowest price tender and then added on all the inevitable things that come along after that. But who knows? Maybe the QS.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, look, sorry, I've done it again, haven't I? Too close. I think it was mentioned early on, like some clients, to get things signed off, the reason why they don't want to do ECI even on a tricky project is because they want the lowest price just to get the job going. Sometimes they're in that position where they're just like, we need the lowest price, we need it to be as competitive as possible, so they're kind of shying away from the ECI route because they're worried about, the fact is that, often is, sometimes we are pushing for market tension when we're going through an ECI approach. We might still be getting 3 prices from each sub-trades if we're doing stage tendering, but I generally see more allowances and things put on. Now, before I piss everyone off, it's a contractor out there. The big question is, would those allowances have become variations under the contract, and your final account, you end up, where do you land? Be a great research for any students in here potentially. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think when we are talking about advantages and disadvantages of ECI, we're really talking about the potential advantages of ECI, because the potential advantages might be that you might be able to do some fast tracking because you've got your contractor in the room earlier. You might be able to make some design changes that make everyone's life easier down the line. There are lots of things that you might be able to do because you've got the contractor in the room, but the issue is how well you actually do them. And I think disadvantages is maybe extra costs, but I think if you go into it realistic about that, and we've got to educate our clients in that space. But the disadvantages that I think we've all seen, particularly in Christchurch, I don't know about Auckland, are clients investing a lot of time and money in an ECI phase only to not find themselves not able to agree a contract price and having to start again. And I think we've seen that in Christchurch happen, never with Naylor Love, no, with other contractors other than Naylor Love. And that's a risk which is why I think we need to get better at doing it right.
You got something else, Johnny?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is about it's mitigating project risk early, and we always talk about risk, but we don't actually talk about the opportunity. We just try and find out where the risk is and either put money on it or make it bigger than a bigger problem. But we need to actually talk more about the opportunity when you're reviewing the design or you're understanding the methodology. It's all an opportunity to actually de-risk the project. So I think that's an ultimate advantage.
Nice. So that's a clear advantage, a clear why. We've heard what is ECI. Now, what we're going to hear next is a little bit about the dream team. What I'm interested in is to understand when do you get your dream team together? When is early too early? And then we would, after that, it'd be great to hear from you, Brad, after we've heard about the dream team, and then we'll just swap the break round. So after we've heard about the dream team, we're going to hear about commercial and contractual aspects, and then we're going to have a coffee break for those, and we've got some food and drinks, and then we're going to hear the contractor's perspective from Johnny, and then we're going to hear a few more case studies and anecdotes led by Mike, and we are keen on questions. If you've got a burning one, let us know along the way, but there will be a session at the end as well. Cool. So, Donna, a little bit about building the team.
The dream team. Right. So, I'm going to touch on briefly here on some of the things we've just talked about around what needs to be true in order to really get the benefit out of an ECI arrangement. And I should mention as well, I was going to cover this earlier, but I personally don't believe ECI is a procurement method or a delivery model or a contracting approach. ECI is it's effectively a component of a delivery strategy. It's an option that you might consider as part of your overall delivery strategy, and we really should be talking about it more in that sense than as if it is a contracting model, because that leads us down a path to incorrect assumptions. So this is very, very much from my own experience. Some of the challenges to getting, I think we've probably all done enough CPD and professional development around team building and what needs to be in place for a high performing team. The challenges that you often come up against in an ECI scenario include inadequate investment. So, sorry, thank you. Inadequate investment. So the client having an unrealistic expectation about what it actually costs to invest in relationships. So we focus a lot, and we pay lawyers a lot to focus on our construction contracts, but there's a whole other aspect, the relational contract, the psychological contract that we have with the other members of the project team, and we don't invest enough in that. So I think that's a real challenge, just clients not really understanding or being aware that takes investment and effort. Governance misalignment, which we've spoken about in terms of process, I think it also can be a challenge just in terms of understanding what it is you're wanting to achieve here, why you're doing it, and how it is different from a traditional design bid build scenario. I've been involved in ECI processes where the team itself has had a vision of what it's trying to achieve, but ultimately the decisions on the project are made by a governance team, a steering committee, or an executive team who are still mired in an adversarial scenario. So that can be a real deal breaker. Ineffective communication, I think this is something that we can all do better on every project we work on. It actually worries me a little bit, the sort of the future workforce in the industry having lesser competency in written and verbal communication, because ultimately we do need to be better in this space. A lot of the difficulties that you have delivering a project of any complexity come back to poor communication. Either poor communication causes the issue or it creates difficulty in resolving the issue. So it's something that we all need to be working on. A guarded adversarial approach, so clients and PMs and consultant teams who engage in an ECI process and talk about collaboration and inclusiveness and an integrated team, but their approach sends a different message. So you've really got to be, it's like dating, right? You've got to be prepared to sort of open up a little bit and share. I don't think when we go into it with a defensive attitude, defensive posture, we're not going to get the benefits from it. And unrealistic expectations about other aspects of ECI process costs. So often by the time the client and the PM have decided that ECI is a great idea, the consultants have already been engaged on contracts that were negotiated 5 years ago that didn't really know what the delivery strategy was going to be. And then the client expects all of the consultants to engage with one or more potential constructors at no additional cost. There is a cost for the consultant team to undertake ECI, and we need to be realistic about that. If you're really open to implementing change, then change costs money, which links back to your question, Pam, about when in the process. There is no hard and fast rule about when, but by far the most common time it seems to be, we seem to kick off ECI phases, is at the beginning of detailed design, which is essentially, by then, it's really too late. But that comes back to some of the other things we've talked about around governance processes, and the realistic ability to get a contractor in the room and to be spending money on planning your construction phase any earlier than that. So I think that's something we probably need to look at as an industry. So Johnny, you mentioned opportunities. So personally, my philosophy as a project manager has always been to steer a team to work as if we were all in the same team on all of my projects. And I see huge opportunities in an ECI model to really capitalise. And I think to get the benefit out of these opportunities, it's really important that everyone involved acknowledges how important those relational dynamics are. So everyone has to be on board with that because it takes effort and investment to build that. We need to establish executive support through education and through early on in the process tailoring our governance processes. So as part of our project management plan, we need to start thinking about what our decision making needs to look like if it's going to work with an ECI strategy arrangement. There's a fantastic opportunity in an ECI phase to collectively decide on your systems and processes for communication, for document management systems, rather than having the awkward conversation about whether you're going to use Aconex or the contractor's preferred document management system once you're in the process of awarding a contract, let's have those conversations a year before that and understand what each party's constraints are. So the engineer's got to provide site reports to the council, and the council insists that they're called site reports. So how do you build that into your process so that we're not duplicating effort, we're not doing things in a dumb way because we haven't had those conversations early enough. So I think that's a huge opportunity. We also need to think about the construction contract itself. And I've spent a lot of time researching this over the past few years. I think we underestimate how much impact the construction contract has on the relational dynamics within the team. Right, so without naming anybody, one of my absolute pet peeves is when, it's usually a contractor, Johnny, quotes the contract at me in an email or an Aconex bit of correspondence. So, and when they could say exactly the same thing informally, and that would be enough, this comes back to our how good are we at communication. When someone quotes the contract at me, gets my back up. Why are you quoting the contract at me? Just say what you mean in normal language. I don't want to communicate using legalese. And we do it because it's shorthand and it's sort of built into our organisation's standards, and so we do it, but it drives dynamics. It drives the sort of undercurrent to our relationships, and I think it can be really damaging. So let's just not do that. And I think the other aspect of the contract is quite often we tend to default to the idea that once we get to the construction phase and we've awarded the contract, things get easy from there, right? Because the contract just tells you what to do. You just, if you run into a problem, you just sort of look at the contract and it tells you that it doesn't. The contract is not, it's not a plan to manage the project, and it should not be treated like that. So we do actually need to be engaging with the process of writing the contract. We should be prepared and brave enough to have conversations that challenge our legal teams. Construction lawyers should be working to help us be more productive and work better together and have fewer disputes. But the primary concern of every construction lawyer is protecting the interests of their client in the event there's a dispute. It's as simple as that. So we need to be the ones who say, that's great if in the event that we're in a dispute in the High Court in 5 years' time, but that's actually not going to work for me on a day-to-day basis. So we do need to be thinking about what's in the construction contract and how does it relate to the relationship dynamic that we've put all this effort into setting up. Last slide. Other aspects of the ECI phase, it's an opportunity to build up psychological safety within an integrated team, which is so critical to establishing that trust and being able to collaborate effectively and being able to innovate. So everyone has to feel that there's no dumb ideas, that and we're not having to be defensive all the time. And if we've made a mistake, we can own it, and we're not going to be damaged by that. So I think it's a great opportunity when you've got your delivery team in the room, but you're not at construction yet, to start building this up. And that's how you get innovation and how you get collaboration. We need to challenge our own preconceptions and assumptions. something I've spent a lot of time over the last 4 years saying to a team in Christchurch. Don't assume that if someone's made a mistake or they've not met a deadline, it's because they don't care about the project, or because they are incompetent, or because they haven't got enough fee. Assume that everyone in the team is always doing their best and has always got the best interests of the project foremost in their minds. Now, it won't always be true, but let's just start there rather than starting with everyone else is not pulling their weight. And because I see that in the language that we use to communicate with one another, and I think that's really damaging. So we do need to really think about that. We need to foster a win-win mindset. So, and what goes with that is being curious about what's important to other members of the team. So understand what the commercial drivers are of the other members of the team. It's okay to need to make some money. That's not, I've asked contractors in workshops, what's their primary driver on this project? And no one was prepared to say, we want to make a healthy margin. Of course you do. We all know that. We're all in one way or another running a business, and that's okay. So let's just front up to that, right? We do need to be selecting team members for aptitude as well as technical competency. And what I mean by that is that collaboration, mutual respect, curiosity come easier to some people than to others. And if we're going to really succeed in these ECI phases, we need to make sure we have the right personnel around the table, not just sort of default to who is available. And it isn't necessarily the same set of competencies and aptitude that you might want from your construction phase team. But in saying that, we do need to plan for a level of continuity, because again, it comes back to the investment and the relational aspect of the team during the ECI phase. It's all lost if you do that with one team and then you move into construction after you've signed the contract and you never see any of those people ever again, right? So there needs to be a degree of continuity and induction processes. How do you bring new people into the team and make sure that they're on the same bus as everybody else? So that's sort of my brain dump on how to build a high performing team and how to maintain and nurture that team throughout the construction phase. But I'm sure everybody has got a lot of gold in that space.